Hey Bushman, between you and me and a gatepost, the real Thunderbolt hideout is on the other side of the road. Way more vantage and escape route, etc. That's interesting, isn't it? It does make you think though, that I think I need to go and check that out.
G'day, my name's Jamie Hazelden and I've been travelling this great country for many years. And what I want to share with you is the great places that I've been to and the places that you can only imagine of getting to. I want to show you and introduce to you some of the colourful characters, sit round a campfire and reminisce and talk about the journey and the places that we're going to go to. So come along with me as I share this journey with you. Proudly supported by and powered by Custom Lithium. Now, who was Frederick Wordsworth Ward, aka Captain Thunderbolt? Well, it all started for him in 1835. That's when he was born. He was born in a big family. They lived in the town of Windsor. Now, they were there for the first decade. He went to a private school, but after leaving the school, they worked out that he could read, but he couldn't write. Now, is that why he turned to being a bushranger? Something we will never know. You know, you think about it, how dense this bush is. Now, Frederick was 11 years old when he got his first job as a station hand. And he used to lead the employees through this bush from one place to the station, and you wouldn't even know whether you're going north, south, east or west, but he knew his way through. Because today's technology, we've got GPSs, we've got phones, we've got all this sort of stuff, but the bushcraft was taught to him by his brother. Now, is that where he started learning all these skills? Over the next decade, Fred worked as a station hand, a drover and a horsebreaker across northern New South Wales, returning to West Maitland to visit family between jobs. Among his many employers, Tokel Station near Patterson in the Hunter Valley, a renowned horse stud owned by Charles Reynolds. In March 1856, Fred offered to help with this muster. Now, the muster went on for a couple of weeks longer and some 45 horses were stolen. Now, as the story goes, he was seen with two accomplices heading to Windsor with those horses. When it came to asking Fred what his involvement was, he passed the buck up to one of the other guys. So, silently, he became involved in horse rustling. And that's where I think it all began. John Garbutt pleaded guilty to the Supreme Court, where he got sentenced to 10 years servitude. Now, on the other hand, Frederick and his nephew James Garbutt, they were sentenced to 10 years hard labour. Now, Frederick was sentenced because of receiving stolen goods, as in horses, and then James, on the flip side, was sentenced for stealing them. And then the both of them got sent to Cockatu Island, where John already was on Cockatu Island, so James and Frederick joined him there. Fred behaved well when he was in prison. He got 3 days of solitary confinement, and that was for falling asleep on the job when he was a wardsman at night. In 1860, he got tickets of leave, which in today's talk is parole. Now, that was of a 10-year sentence, he only served 4. What he had to do was check in every 3 months to go to a muster. Well, John Garbutt was lucky enough, after getting out of prison, to meet a wealthy widow, and that's where he stayed on her station. Now, it just so happens that Frederick went to the wedding, and that's where he met Maryanne, a proud Wimmera woman. And not long after that, she became pregnant. Now, Maryanne was born in 1834, and that was in Gloucester. Now, she was sent to an orphanage in Sydney. That's where we think she's learnt her literacy, her numeracy, and where we are here is at the Dingo Gate. Now, normally we've got a picturesque view right there behind us, so I'm not sure what it actually looks like because of that cloud cover.
For reasons still unknown, Fred made the decision to take Maryanne back to her father's farm, not far from Gloucester, so she could give birth with surrounding family. Once she had settled in, Thunderbolt rode bareback just over 340 kilometres to Mudgee in time for his scheduled muster. But he was late, and that single mistake cost him dearly. His ticket of leave was revoked. The road ahead for Fred was about to get a whole lot harder.
Well, we've headed down into the big smoke. Right behind me is Cockatu Island. Now, this is where Frederick Ward got locked up and put onto that island. Now, if we go back, what happened? He's strolled into town on a stolen horse, which has then put him back, straight back into the prison. But he didn't just get put into the prison, he got his sentence where he had an extra another 3 years put onto it, making 9 years that he's going to be stuck on that island. Can you only imagine just how it would have been? Now, the one thing he didn't do was he didn't get put in irons, so he was still free to move around. But he got put into solitary confinement with quite a few other fellas. And of course, in 1863, they kicked up a big stink about it. Now, it just so happened that him and another fella by the name of Fred, they went down to their working stations, but absconded away from it. One was in irons, the other one wasn't. As the story goes, they say that Maryanne actually swam over from Balmain and put a file over there so that they could file through the irons. Who knows if that's true or not? It's just another one of those stories, but it's just fascinating to actually hear those sort of stories. Now, they went to the northern side of the island and off they went into the water, shark-infested waters. Now, the tide probably picked them up and carried them as well at the same time. It would have been a scary time, but they've made it across to the mainland of Balmain, and that's where we're standing here. So this seems to be like a very close point from Cockatu Island. They've got onto the mainland, and then off they've gone.
They made it to the New England district in 1863. Now, they were seen near the big rock, which is now called Thunderbolts Rock. Now, they got into a bit of a shootout there where Fred copped one in behind the knee, but he managed to escape.
Just a few weeks later, Fred and Britain parted ways. Fred made his way south once again back to Maitland district. Then on December 22nd, 1863, he struck again, holding up a toll bar operator at Rufford. Now, legend has it, Fred banged on the toll keeper's door so hard that man cried out, "By God, I thought it must have been a thunderbolt." And with the pistol raised, Fred is said to have replied, "I am thunder, and this is bolt." It's a great story, but the dramatic line, most likely a myth, just one of the many tales that would build the legend of Captain Thunderbolt in the years to come.
So Fred and Maryanne, they headed off to the lawless plains where they could stash themselves away for a short time. Then Fred decided that he was going to hook up with another 3 accomplices to do another bushranging stint. The gang split in mid-1865 and then they fled to Queensland. You know, when you think about it, they get around a fair old bit, especially the distances they're covering when you're on horseback. Wow.
Later in 1865, Fred teamed up with Patrick Kelly and a bushranger named Jimmy the Whisperer, launching another spree across the northern western district. December that year at Carroll, the gang's run turned violent when Jimmy shot but did not kill a policeman.
Well, here we are, we're at Barington Tops. This is Thunderbolts Lookout. Normally we've got a specky view, well, we're starting to get a bit of a clearing over there now,
but it's really chilly up here. The wind's blowing, it's full of cloud cover. But anyway, as the story goes with Thunderbolt, so they've come down south of Gloucester, and he's split from the gang. He's headed in to pick up Maryanne and brought her into the Gloucester Shire, and then they've headed up into the mountains here, and that's where they've hidden for a little while. And this is in 1866. Now, not long after that, the police picked up Maryanne and they put her into jail. Now, Maryanne, being as smart as what she was, she wrote a letter to the courts and then asked for a pardon. But it was only that a shopkeeper could comment on how well she spoke that she was innocent, that they pardoned her and let her go.
Fred kept a low profile for the most of 1866, but turned to bushranging in early 1867, triggered once again when Maryanne was captured by police and sent back to prison for some unknown crime.
Well, it's really hard to imagine it's mid-afternoon when it's as dark as what it is right now. Now, Thunderbolt had a new accomplice in this area, Thomas Mason. Now, Thomas then suddenly got himself caught in 1867, so then Thunderbolt had to come up with another plan. And so he decided to elope with a young half-Aboriginal woman, Louisa Mason. Don't know if it was a relative in any which way, but they eloped. And I'm afraid that Louisa didn't make it. She only made it a couple of months and passed away from pneumonia up near the Goulburn River. And then Fred soon returned to Maryanne. And it wasn't too long that she was pregnant again with her youngest. And then before you know it, they were separated and never seen together again. Now, what the story goes is Maryanne became a nurse and lived a quiet life for the rest of her life. And she was working with people, and they had no idea that she was Thunderbolt's woman back in those days. And we believe she passed away in 1905.
With the winter setting in and the cold creeping over Barington Tops, the days were growing shorter and the nights a lot darker. And a storm meant to be heading my way, I decided it was time to head off and make camp for the night. Looks like the weather hasn't changed this morning. Still cold, still damp, and that low mist hanging in the trees like it's got nowhere else to be. The kind of morning that bites through the clothing, and the moment you step out of your swag, or in my case, the Oztent rooftop tent, I fire up the stove and cook myself up a warm brekkie. Something simple but hearty. Then I pour a good strong cup of coffee, more for the heat than the caffeine, just to try and take that edge off. So I'll soak it in for a bit. The sounds, the stillness. Then once it's warm enough to move, it's time to start packing up camp and get back out on the tracks. The storm we were meant to get last night never really hit full force. It rolled in with a bit of rain and a whole lot of wind, enough to keep me awake for a while, listening to the trees creak and sway. By the sound of it, I thought it might have been something big, but it ended up passing through quickly. Still looks like it did a bit of damage on the way through. Some trees have come down nearby, nothing major, but a good reminder of how wild, unpredictable these places can be, especially in the winter months. So be careful when you're camping, and especially under some of these trees.
As the story goes, Frederick got around a bit, as we know, with the distance he's crossed and travelled all throughout the states. Now they say that there was another one, Captain Thunderbolt, in South Australia. Now, did he travel over there, or was it somebody else trying to live up to his name? Now again, we're not going to know exactly what happened, but we did hear that there was stories going to editors on the crimes that were getting committed over there, weren't nothing like the crimes that Frederick did over this side of the country. Now, when we look back at that, Frederick was illiterate, so how did he write them a letter? Because that's what it states, that he wrote the editors a letter to say that they weren't his crimes.
Dear editor, my name is Captain Thunderbolt. I wish to inform you that these petty crimes being carried out are not crimes committed by myself, but rather the work of someone trying to impersonate my character.
So it always makes you think on how the history's made up, how it all comes together, but it's always an interesting journey to learn and understand this stuff.
And who knows where else he might have travelled. With a horse under him and the law on his tail, there's no telling how far he went or where he lay low between jobs. Captain Thunderbolt was no stranger to the land out here. He had hideouts scattered across this part of the countryside, tucked away in the hills, along the riverbanks and deep in the scrub.
You can only imagine the view he had standing up there on that rock, looking straight out there at that range area there, but you could see down below, because the trees wouldn't be up as high as what they are now. And you could see right through, to your left and to your right. Amazing. So I've just wandered through this area here because I was trying to get up to here, but obviously I've got to go round. But I've looked down in this crevice here and over there, and it goes into another fully blown cave. So we're going to try and go back around that way and see if we can get to this cave down in here. So this is what they call the overhang rock, where they used to camp. Now you used to scramble out of here, up on top of here, because the road out the front there was the main road to Warwick. And he could then sit up there, capture them as they went past and rob them of their gold or whatever they had. And there was a story once upon a time that he robbed this German band. He actually got them to play for him and he gave them half their money back and let them go again. Incredible the stories you hear. How true they are, we'll never know. But it's always great to research, have a look at the history and go and visit the places. They're pretty awesome. But next door, I just want to show you that. That's where he housed the horses.
His story still lingers in these quiet places. Part truth, part legend. Who will ever know, really?
And I'm guessing, as I said before, I reckon this is the area where they actually housed the horses just in here overnight, and then they camped in next door.
Australia's history with bushrangers runs deep. Wild times and wilder characters. And when you stop to think about it, there must have been countless hideouts scattered across the country. If only the walls could talk. Imagine the stories they'd tell. Wow. Now there are stories that when the heat from the law got too much for Thunderbolt, they say he fled, slipped into the shadows of an American gold rush in the late 1800s. Was this to start a new life as an outlaw cowboy? And then the tale goes that he eventually settled in Canada, living out his days quietly far from the life of a bushranger and passing away in the early 1900s. But is that the truth, or just another chapter in the legend tales? Or did he meet his match right here on Australian soil in 1870?
Old Thunderbolt had got himself an accomplice, William Monckton. Now they hung out for about a year and a half. You know, they went in and out, then they separated again. Here on Kentucky Creek, this was where Thunderbolt's resting place was. He was shot by one of the local police here, and so somewhere in this area, that's where he passed away. I love to have a look around at these places because, you know, it's been hundreds of years since. But the one thing I like to look at is you look just up there in that rocky outcrop and you can see a cave. Now, could that have been the place where the battle might have taken place or where he was hiding out at the time of it happening? It's just one of those things you always get to think about it because what really actually happened?
There's another version of the story, one that suggests Thunderbolt didn't just vanish, he was helped. Some say he was given shelter by locals when the heat from the law became too much. In return, Thunderbolt handed over some of money, not just as a thanks, but with a purpose. He asked them to use it to pay for a headstone. A decoy perhaps? Something to mark his death before he set sail and slipped away for good? If it's true, it's a clever move, and it only adds to enduring mystery and whether Captain Thunderbolt truly died in Australia or disappeared into history.
We're in Yarella, which is smack bang in the middle between Brisbane and Sydney. Well, we've finally come to the resting place of Frederick Ward, Thunderbolt. 36 years of age, he had a crime spree history for 15 years, doing robberies and whatnot.
Captain Thunderbolt is remembered as having the longest bushranging career in New South Wales. But truth is, he likely wouldn't have lasted half as long without Maryanne by his side. She taught the illiterate Fred Ward to write, help find food and shelter, and spread false leads to throw the law off his trail. And when he was shot, it was Maryanne who nursed him back to health. Behind the legend of Thunderbolt was a woman whose strength, loyalty and smarts were just as vital to him as she was.
But one thing I have seen walking around in here is how old some of these graves are. It's really incredible. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this adventure as much as I have. Make sure you drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on our next adventure.